To sing your cards when you flash up the moon. Get day, see Sunday afternoon.
Hello there, I'm Chris. I've just come back from interviewing Malcolm with regards to his life as a careers advisor over the last 30 odd years. So what follows is that interview over several stages of his life. So I hope you enjoy. It's very much a homemade type video, so please don't expect any polished video editing or anything like that, but it's made with much affection and hopefully lots of reflection. So if you're interested in the history of the career service and what it's been like in Kent from a very subjective viewpoint, I hope you find the following useful and interesting. All the best. Greetings, Malcolm.
Greetings,
Right.
Sir Chris.
So for our viewers or anyone who's wanting to watch this or fancy watching this, it's March 2022. I'm Chris, this is Malcolm.
Malcolm Scott.
And what we're doing is, I'm a careers advisor, currently still practicing. And Malcolm, you recently retired, how many years ago?
Well, my last gainful day of employment really was actually 2 years ago, before I was furloughed due to COVID. So it's really about 18 months I've been a man of leisure, yes.
Fantastic. And how are you finding the life of leisure?
I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Marvellous, fantastic.
Not to denigrate my previous career, you understand, but it is much better than working.
Fantastic. Now, Malcolm, not only being my friend and my mentor, as we've heard, retired a couple of years ago, just as COVID was sort of hitting there and was furloughed. But you were a careers advisor of great standing.
Thank you.
In Kent. Yeah.
I did some sitting down as well.
Well, yes. And how many years did you serve as a careers advisor?
Well, I started training in 1983 and finished 2020, so 37 years, is that?
Approximately something like
38 years, 37 years as qualified, 38 if you include the year of training.
Fantastic, great stuff. So what we thought we would do is that whilst I was working with Malcolm, and Malcolm helped to train me, so all the good habits and the bad habits we could put on Malcolm for this. But I was told lots of stories about the career service, the history of the career service, where careers advisors came from in terms of previous theories, models and ways of working. Now, with Malcolm retiring, a lot of that knowledge is in danger of being lost. And there's lots of videos out there and vlogs of models, theories and all those sorts of approaches, but there's very few documentations of the lived experience of a careers advisor, particularly working through all the changing times, all that history from the 80s right up to 2022. We've got this great celebration of 100 years of careers that's currently happening. So I wanted to capture some of it. So we thought we'd have a cup of tea and I'll talk to Malcolm and we would capture some of his stories, history, lived experience of being a careers advisor. So that's the plan.
Here we go.
There we go. So Malcolm, what I thought we'd start with, I was having a bit of a think about this on the sort of drive over here to Whitstable. Instead of starting with where you started as a careers advisor, I wanted to start with your experiences of careers as a student. Yeah, and starting about what was life like when you were growing up and making your career choices, those first few choices. What were your experiences of career services?
Okay, well, I went to a technical high school in Broadstairs. They don't exist anymore, they've all become grammar schools, but the careers teacher was a horrible maths teacher who we didn't like very much. So the last thing you do is to explain to him your plans or ideas. And the careers library was a few of those hanging files in a filing cupboard, usually more about the army than anything else because he was a retired major. The other thing at school was if you wanted to go to university, you had to apply through UCA, and again, UCA was managed by another rather difficult maths teacher who was rather unapproachable in my view, so I decided not to go to university. We did have an interview, I did have a careers interview, and this would have been, because the careers service was established formally in 1973, and this would have been in 1973, I think, when it happened. Well, I had my interview before that, was the Youth Employment Service. and I had an interview, but it wasn't really successful because my mum and my dad were there and dominated everything, and then there was also the careers teacher and the careers advisor, careers officer as they were called then, and I don't think I really gained very much from it. It got a bit better when I was working in a bank and not really enjoying it, and I did have an interview with, it was the Department of Employment Job Centre, probably something to do with the Manpower Services Commission. They did a kind of an interest inventory test. I had to go to Maidstone for that, and they came up with some suggestions of careers I could try. That was as an adult. But then when I was working in London, I wanted to find out more about going to university, and I managed to find a careers advisor who's based at a college in Putney, and I was allowed to have an interview. Even though I wasn't a student at Putney College, they said yes, you can have an interview with this careers advisor, and it was great because he told me how I could research where to do a degree. I wanted to do a degree in English, and I knew about the polytechnics, but I didn't know about the other establishments like Roehampton. And this is another option that you've got that you might want to consider. So it's opened my eyes to that. Then when I was at university, there was a careers advisor there, sent vacancies out. It was quite helpful, but in the end, I managed to get a job working with a company that I'd worked for during my holidays, student university holidays.
How did the approaches change? So you had the careers advisor, and it sounded like the world and his wife when you were at school, all these different people, and then you had these different kind of experiences. When we sort of started very much client centred, very much putting our clients at the centre of what we do. Was that the experience that you had?
Yeah, because even in 1973, I remember this careers interview. The question, because I was thinking, my dad thought it'd be a very good idea if I went to work in a bank because it'd be a safe job. Right. No chance of being unemployed or redundant or anything like that. And I knew nothing about banking. I didn't know what it was. All I knew was I was interested in Hawkwind. Right. And Captain Beefheart, and there was a bit of a cognitive dissonance between that interest and working in a bank.
I was going to say quite extreme.
And I remember the careers advisor said, "Where does interest come from, and how? What is your?" I think the question was along the lines of, "What do you think about floating the pound?" Which was what was happening at the time. The pound was going to find its own level against foreign currencies. I suppose that's what it is now. I don't really know much about economics, but and I thought, well, I'm not really interested at all in floating the pound. So it actually made me think, is this a suitable career? In the end, it wasn't a suitable career at all. It was, in fact, I sometimes think maybe I became interested in training to be a careers advisor, indeed working as a careers advisor, in a way of saving young people from a career in banking, or not just banking, but anything unsuitable.
So did you sort of think that it's almost like, so is it, I mean, we talked about it before, it's like the power of good questions,
Yeah, and when I'd done my own training in careers guidance, I could reflect back on my own experience and see how they worked with me.
Yeah.
Just not pushing or not directing, but being very much, this is what you need to know to enable you to make your own decision.
Yeah, it's interesting also you sort of said when you were looking at like the sort of later on, it's like, well, how to research, how to find stuff out, those traditional career management sort of skills, and actually empowering you to have those skills to be able to go forward to go and find stuff out.
Exactly, and it was much harder in those days because, I mean, careers information was just a load of leaflets in a school teacher's room. My dad came home once from work saying that he'd seen a careers centre in Margate. Yeah. But he didn't, he just said, yeah, there's that there, or there's this there, and this, but he didn't actually say, I will take you there and we can get some help, or shall we, he very much left it to me really, so perhaps he could have been a bit more sort of supportive there in pushing me into it rather to find out more about it.
Yeah. It was interesting what you're saying, like it's that same thing with parents being in the interview, and then how the parents or the carers in the interview can sometimes stop our clients talking. Are they barriers or are they enablers, depending on the young person? You can think even now that happens sadly, in some circumstances.
They can be both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and depending on the young person and the parents, carers, and that whole relationship dynamic.
And the careers, well, you've got to manage it so carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, so you took yourself through to starting to, you know, your journey through
Yes.
sort of life and all of this. I suppose it's a good way to carry on. Did you then, so how old were you at this point in terms of thinking about doing an English degree, and did you then decide to go for it? What happened next?
Well, I left the bank,
Yeah.
which I was there for about a year, and this interview I had with the organised through the job centre, this psychometric, I think it was just a questionnaire, I think it wasn't a computer involved, suggested I should be doing something more media related. So I applied generally to the BBC, and they interviewed me, and they said, well, there's a job going here, if you want it, start as soon as you're ready. So I said, okay. So I ended up working in educational broadcasting, and then that led on to a job in school broadcasting radio. So it was only it was sort of like in the organiser's office. We had to produce transmission schedules, and it was the administration behind the kind of the production of these school radio programmes.
Yeah. And how old were you at that point?
19.
19. Yeah. So there's quite a few changes here going on. It was like, it wasn't just sort of like a little bit of a change. It was like you weren't in the bank for a long time. It was a little bit, and then boom, 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 boom.
No.
So quite rapid sort of changes.
I couldn't stand more than a year in a bank. No, that was enough. I left clinically depressed. So that involved commuting to London, which was okay for a year. Again, things go over yearly chunks. And that was I was there for about 4 years at the BBC, but then it seemed I felt that I could have done something more. And a lot of people saying, well, if you want to really get on, you have to have a degree if you want to work in the BBC. And I thought, well, that's quite a big commitment. Yeah. In fact, it actually wasn't a big commitment at all, because the salary at the BBC was so low, and the student grant in the London Education Authority was so generous, and knowing that I could work tax-free, probably back at the BBC during the long summer vacation, meant that I was actually slightly better off as a student and working in the summer tax-free than I would be working full-time at the BBC.
So
also, rather luckily, I just moved in with Sue, I've been married 42 years, but I'm always eternally grateful to her, because when my student grant did run out at the end of some of the term, she did sub me quite generously in many ways.
Fabulous.
Thank you, Sue.
So I mean, completely different world in terms of student finance, in terms of just here's the money, get a degree.
Well, a very small percentage of students went on to university. So
why was that at the time? Why were so few going? Because you've got all these amazing opportunities, like you said, like the grants were generous. Why were so few students going? When financially there was, because a lot of the barriers that get talked about now is like the misinformation around student finance, and in contrast, there was this, from what you've described, there's lots of grants, lots of. So what was the
whole structure of education was totally different back then. When I started work as a careers advisor in Medway, only 1/3 of the Year 11 cohort progressed onto full-time further study.
Oh wow! Okay. Yes.
So if you imagine in Kent, there were at that time 25,000 Year 11 students each year.
Yeah.
16,000 of them were going into the employment market, which is why things like the youth training scheme was so important, to try and absorb this vast number of unemployed 16-year-olds. Yeah. So if you've got then only 1/3 of the cohort going into, and that will be sixth form as well as college, you've then got a fewer number, only half of those who did A-levels progressed on to university. So it was fewer places at university. I mean, in the 60s, there was something called the Robbins Report, which developed a whole new range of higher education institutions called polytechnics, which was supposed to be representing more local employment requirements for degrees. So the idea was they'd be running more technical courses, but in fact they did. You could also do English and humanities and things as well there. and of course a lot of technical courses were run by the traditional universities as well. But it was a time when there were fewer universities, a few polytechnics, but also some colleges of higher education. For example, I mean, to be a school teacher, you didn't actually need a degree. In that, when Sue, my wife, when she trained to be a teacher, you did a 3-year certificate in education course, and that qualified you to teach.
Yep.
If you stayed on an extra year, you got a Bachelor of Education, which luckily she did.
Yep.
Because then she was fully qualified for a graduate profession. Yeah.
So was the whole shape of the labour market, I suppose, differently
Much
as well?
different, yeah.
So was there? I mean, there's lots of talk now about the whole more graduates filling our graduate opportunities. Were there? You've got fewer graduates coming through at that time. From what you're sort of telling us, was there a battle for graduate jobs, or was there enough graduate jobs? What did that side of the picture
the
look
whole
like?
picture of the labour was quite a specialist question you're asking, but there were jobs for people who could sweep up warehouse or sweep up yards. You know, there were more kind of jobs requiring fewer skills, if you like, in those days. Before technology, the whole labour market was very much more, there'd be more routine jobs.
Yeah.
And so the jobs that required a degree tended to be more, I suppose, in things like, well, obviously law, medicine, some engineering. But even then, there were routes in that you didn't need to have a degree to do. There were more, I suppose, employer-provided routes, things like apprenticeships and so on, and progression training. Well, not everybody who worked at the BBC had a degree. Yeah. They just said that it would be, quite useful, particularly in my department, because most of the people most of the producers in school radio in the BBC were ex-teachers, so they would have all have had. But then I looked at, if you find an old prospectus, if you were at school, I found my old school prospectus from my school, and you look at the list of the teachers and their qualifications. Even then, this was the teaching GCSE teaching, or O levels, then A levels. Many of them didn't have degrees.
Yeah, so completely different in terms of. So it's such a different.
They had equivalent qualifications, but they weren't classed as degrees.
Yeah,
and lots of other professions didn't. I mean, nurses didn't, physiotherapists didn't. They didn't. Things became degrees over the time I was a careers advisor.
It almost sounds like that there's been this almost. It's a process that's easy to miss, but almost like an accreditation of everything in terms of. So like you're saying, like with physiotherapists, but then you've also got the jobs traditionally with like lower skills, even where they're lower skilled now. Again, it's like you need qualifications for this and that. And I know working with some vulnerable young people that I work with now, that if they haven't got, you haven't got that or that in your qualifications, you can't get into this job, you can't get into the training pathway because everything's so accredited that if you haven't got that, it's really difficult to find a way in now. So but it almost sounds like from when you were starting out in careers that there was a bit more flexibility within the pathways, the labour market, the routes, the options and stuff that are out there. Did it feel
I think employers were more able to help with their staff's progression. Yeah. If they were able. I mean, I know people who, for example, started with well, I suppose in things like the police and in working for the water authorities and things that were put on courses, became technicians, got their ONC, HND, HNC would have been at the time, then converted that to a degree, all done through the employer's expense.
And it's that sort of thing of like, how much do employers actually invest in training of their staff? And it's that question that sort of still goes on now, isn't it? In terms of when we look at the labour market, we look at training, and we go, well, who's investing, who's not investing? All employers are going, well, we think the government should train. So it's an interesting, it's a fluctuating situation.
Yes, and also that I think the change was beginning to be recognised when I started work as a careers advisor in the mid-80s, because I know parents would come to interviews and say, is there a firm locally where my son could start at the bottom and work his way up, or could my daughter work her way up through this? And the answer to that question were fewer and fewer, and there are shortcuts you can take.
And so with those shortcuts, with that, where using education as that, I know we talked about it in the past, that kind of the and I know you're a great believer in education as a way to help young people and adults to get on by sort of using, taking your skills, training, going further, all of that. Did that become more and more prevalent in terms as the years went on?
I think that yes, and that's where the job of careers advisor, you could see it moving from say before when it was the Youth Employment Bureau, whatever that was set up before my time.
Yeah.
But then you were a careers officer,
Yeah.
and your main responsibility was getting these young school leavers into jobs.
Yeah.
By the end of my career, I didn't even have a vacancy service. You don't have that now, do you?
No.
So it was much more about guiding, and in many ways more interesting. It was about guiding, helping young people explore and make decisions about routes through education, training, and into the workplace at whatever point they want to get in.
Yeah. So did you feel that? You think it was more interesting as it developed into this very sort of different way of working? Is that how it kind of sort of felt for you?
Less placement, more guide, more pure guidance.
Yeah. So with the guidance side, so it's becomes less about the job matching and kind of like where are you now, finding work to do it, and then more about the kind of those deeper, longer questions and stuff. Yeah.
In many ways, much more guiding, more therapeutic.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see that there's, I know within sort of the cohort that there's a group of us that are in contact nationally now, and it's some of the stuff that we've discussed, and it's almost like you can sort of see how the role has changed, and we found that it's now over the last few years it's become more creative in terms of different approaches and different styles, and certainly more therapeutic in terms of the approaches that are being taken, which makes it quite interesting. And then in contrast to that, there's the wider government policy, and maybe what do they see their role as for careers officers, which is a whole other can of worms. Yeah. So going back to your journey then, so we sort of left you there at that point where you were like, okay, you need to go and get a degree. Yeah?
Yes, okay.
How did you make that decision? Because you said you got the research and stuff, and you said it wasn't, now we've got like the internet for looking stuff up, and I was thinking of this talk that I was at a post-18 talk yesterday, and we had a chap from the local university who came down, he was doing his sort of talk, it was absolutely brilliant, and all, looking at all of these online resources and things and questions and stuff to do and how to make sense of university choices. What was it like for you choosing university?
I thought, well, I think I'd like to do this, because people have said I wasn't really progressing that far in the BBC. It was a fun place to work, really interesting, but I thought I'd do something else. I like the idea of being a student and devoting more time to me, my growth and development, rather than an employer.
Yeah.
I'd done a lot of reading. I was interested in English, and I'd found out a couple of polytechnics, North London Poly and Middlesex, where they did English degrees. But I went for the interview because I thought there must be another way, or there might be a different route through. My A-level results, I remember I was 23 by the time I'd started, so they probably weren't as relevant, my A-level results, as they would have been if I'd been 18.
Yeah.
And I didn't even think about applying to the London University. I suppose I should have done it in a way. I don't know where I might be now if I hadn't done. But I went to Roehampton because the man at the Putney Careers office in the college said there's another place locally where you could travel to from where you live in Clapham, and you have to do 2 subjects. I thought that's fine. I could do English with a minor in environmental studies, and I went on open day, and it was applied, and it was fantastic. Yeah, it was an ex-teacher training college. Yeah. So most of the students were women, which I always got on really well, and this course was great, and I got a University of London degree because it was what they offered. It was all moderated by the University of London. Yeah,
and then was the timeline the same in terms of, so we know now that it's, for students today, it's like you've got like year 12, it's like that research year, and then you've got to get your applications in, and the whole kind of the then you've got that whole sort of cycle beforehand.
Well, now it's slightly different because this was about April, and I decided I thought I'd give it a go, and then May I think I filled in the application forms. You just applied direct.
Yeah. So taking the deadlines weren't so.
No, I mean it was before. I mean there was UCA for universities. I missed that deadline. Maybe that's why I didn't apply for university. I missed that deadline, but with polytechnics you applied direct, and for this other places like Roehampton and you also applied direct on one of their application forms.
Yeah.
And when I got there, the principal of Frobel College I applied for, he came into the room where we were all sitting waiting. He said, "Oh, excellent! Some chaps coming. We need more chaps." So I thought, "Oh, that seemed to be onto a winner here."
And the university experience itself, how
Well, I was living at
like?
home. living with Sue.
Yeah.
Got married and everything. So I wasn't sort of fully immersed in the sort of social side. It was really my own circle of friends and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I was 5 years older than the other students, but I still made a lot of good friends and had a good time. And
did you carry on working with the BBC?
Yeah, I did for that summer.
Yeah.
After year one, then after year two, there was a recession and the BBC weren't recruiting any temps. So I went to an agency, looked for some temporary work, and they sent me to a place called ARA International, which was a recruitment consultancy engaged in recruiting UK staff to work. One of the major clients was the Arabian American Oil Company.
Yeah.
And so the work we were doing was recruiting engineers, technicians, medical staff, clerical staff, language tutors and so on, education staff, to work in Saudi Arabia. We had other clients as well in Oman and Kuwait and places like that, mainly in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And so I did that for that summer after year two, and then after year three, when I finished my degree, I was unemployed. But then they found a vacancy for me. They said, "You were good when you came over the summer, so last year, so we'd like to offer you a job there, just near Oxford Circus."
So very similar to what happens now with young people.
It's what you do in the holidays that
Yeah.
gets you the job when you graduate. I mean, I tried to apply for loads of other things, but nothing. And it was a really difficult time. Early 81.
Yeah.
Margaret
So
Thatcher
when we
was
had that
Prime
first
Minister.
recession kind of hitting.
Yeah, it was all very difficult, and interest rates were sky high, and the economy just wasn't functioning. But there were, luckily, the Saudi Arabia there was recruiting, so there was a job for me doing that, and I was there for about 2 years working there in a number of different clients within that agency. And then I'd heard that there was a way of training for the careers service, because there was somebody who had worked with that with the ARA who'd gone to do the full-time course at Reading. But then, miraculously, in March 1983, there was an advert in The Guardian, which I have here. You'll have to put this on the...
Yep.
So this is it, for trainee careers officers from persons with at least 3 years successful experience in gainful employment and graduate qualifications or equivalent. Persons, there were 6 vacancies, appointed to be seconded on salary to a full-time course of training on successful completion of the course and apply for established posts in the careers service. That's Kent County Council.
So with this, so you've got this, oh crikey, look at that. I'm just sort of seeing that next to it, you've got loads of other jobs here. You've got press officer, you've got legal researcher, you've got social worker, principal officer, children's services, deputy accounts officer, and others. What made that stand out to you? What made you go, that's it?
Well, I knew the job was there. I knew a bit about it because somebody I worked with had gone a year before. I've been interested in, I suppose it was thinking this is a job that is actually happening now, because most jobs was that, oh, you're not recruiting at the moment, or you don't want to be working, 83, we've got a terrible recession. Here was a job that was, I was working recruiting people working in Saudi Arabia who were paid by the number of people who actually got to get on the plane and go. It was very much the private sector profit target. And the salary was quite good. I'm still in touch with people I work with back there in the day, but and we did have quite a nice lifestyle. But I felt I wanted to do something more in the public sector. And this seemed like a good way of doing it. And being married to a teacher, beginning and understanding what goes on in schools and education and so on, I applied.
Yeah. And how old were you at that point, roughly?
27, just 28.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which I never knew that, and I find that really, really interesting because you've had all of this other stuff you did before, and something I'm really interested in is, we look at sort of theory, and we look at when young people figure out what they want to do. It's something I talk to young people about, and we understand that the average is around about it's 25 to 30, that kind of bit where that bit in our brain, the amygdala, the bit that weighs up risk, it's fully developed. We've gone through this amazing explorative phase, and then there it is, and I never knew that. But that's, for my own journey, that was the same age when I started as well, when we first met. Exactly. So I find that's spooky, but really cool at the same time. So what happened? Tell us what happened, because obviously you became a careers advisor. So what happened next?
Well, what happens is it's any job I've ever applied for in careers service, whatever it's been, I've never got it.
Okay, really?
Straight.
Oh,
through.
what happens?
Yeah. Every time I've applied, it's always been, we can't offer you that, but I'm afraid, it's not. So in this case, I applied and I had an interview. They had 200 applicants from that advert, and they interviewed 20. I got an interview, and then they said, "No, I'm sorry, we can't offer you a place." And I think I knew why, because what I didn't have was direct work experience with young people. I'd done employers, I'd done adults, I'd done qualifications, I knew about training and so on, but I didn't have any direct experience working with young people. So then what I thought I'd do was I would apply to the college anyway. So college, Kent College for the Careers Service at Swanley.
Yeah, so this was Cogs.
This was Cogs, Swanley, I thought, well, I'll apply. And they interviewed me, and they said, well, it's now May, June, with the course starts in September, we're getting quite full. If we offer you a place, we'll probably have to put you on a waiting list. So I thought, okay. But then when the letter came, they said, no, we can offer you a place. Yeah. So that was good. Then I had to apply for the grant, and I had to go for an interview for that, and they said, yes, you can have a grant. So the grant, I think, was about £1,800 a year.
Who did the grant come from?
Kent County Council.
So they paid for it?
Yeah, and they paid my tuition fees as well.
Fab.
But then when I got to Swanley at the course, there were 6. There were supposed to be 6 of these Kent trainees. Only 5 turned up.
Oh, okay.
So there was one had dropped out. And so they re-advertised for this Kent trainee. Yeah. And so I put in my application again, and I was interviewed again by John Watson, head of careers, principal careers officer, and Sue Grunwell, training. And 2 other people were interviewed, and they said the questions were all much the same, but because what happened was, during that summer, I walked out of this job at ARA International because I couldn't stand it anymore. And I went to an agency and ended up working for Amy Roadstone Corporation as a cost clerk for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then the paperboy mistakenly put a copy of the Gravesend Reporter through my letterbox. Right. And there was a job in it for a YTS administrator.
Oh, wow.
So I thought, well, I'll apply for that.
Yeah.
And they said, it's only a summer secondment because the whole scheme might fold in September. What are your views on this? Was the interview at North West Kent College in Dartford. I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in September yet, so because I've applied for some other things as well, but I can give you the summer, see how it goes. And so I was appointed to that. So I worked on that over the summer. So when I got to my second interview with Kent Careers Service at Swanley, I was able to say, I've had a whole summer working with YTS trainees, school leavers, allocating them places on the youth training scheme. And so they offered me the job. So instead of an £1,800 grant, I got a salary of about £5,000 to cover for the year.
I mean, what's amazing with this is that there's so many parallels to what we talk to young people about our clients now. You know, it's the little bits of work experience, it's the other bits and pieces that you do that get you to where you want to be.
And pure serendipity.
Luck.
Pure chance.
Happenstance. you know, which is the sort of sitting here hearing, and I've never heard this before. So I'm sort of sitting here going, wow, this matches to what we've been working with the clients, and this was your story. And there's so many parallels, and it's great stuff. It's powerful. It's really cool. So I suppose the next bit is that you started at Cogs, isn't it? So
yeah, did the course at College of Guidance Studies, Swanley. And that was fine. Passed the right number of interviews, group works, did all the employer visits, and yeah.
So what we'll do is we're going to take a bit of a pause there, and then we'll come back and we'll dive into what your life as a careers advisor starting out looks like. How's that sound?
Fine.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Malcolm.
Always a pleasure.
Cool.
Let's see how
Close my eyes and drift away. Close my eyes and drift away. Oh, I forgot a bit there.